Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the new RunCam Split 4, and this camera does 4K. And oftentimes, we're not only concerned about how good that HD or 4K image is, we're also very concerned about how that goggle view is, what we see in the goggle, because these cameras record on board. They have a little SD card slot in them that allows them to record that extra high definition or 4K picture, but it also is responsible for sending that image to our goggles, and it's very different. In my Mobula 6 HD review, I said that the RunCam Split 3 Lite was the best single camera dual view, meaning HD as well as FPV, on the market. And how does this one stack up? Well, let's get started. The RunCam Split 4 does allow you to connect it to your flight controller for switch controls. So you have your RX and your TX pads right here. Of course, we've got our signal, our negative, and then right back here the red wire is our positive. If by chance you did not want to use the buttons to navigate the menu, you can wire up to these two pads right here, one of those little control boards, but it does not come with a control board. What does it come with? Well, it comes with a mounting adapter because the camera's 14 by 14 millimeters. It also comes with some standoffs, some nuts, and some screws, and a wiring harness to mount it up on your flight stack. And of course, it comes in a standard box. And as you can see there on the box, it takes an input voltage from 5 volts to 20 volts, and it also does 4K at 30 frames per second, or 2.7K at 60 frames per second, or 1080p at 60 frames a second as well. It weighs 10.5 grams. With the mounting adapter, it weighs just over 11 grams. This is the highest speed SD card I have, and I did feel the latency when recording at 4K. So our first test, we're in 4K in this test, and we're going to do the light test on the camera so you can get a fix on how quickly the camera corrects for light changes that are fairly dramatic, from the cloth being directly on the lens to the cloth being about 1.5 feet away, and to the cloth being as far as my arm can possibly reach. You do see we have a little bit of prop in view. We've got that little yellow prop on the left that you can see. The quad I'm using is relatively beefy as far as weight for a micro goes, so that does help me be able to get a clear image for you to be able to see and diagnose the footage as to how good a quality it is, or any flaws you might be looking for, or maybe it's just perfect. Now, the thing that I noticed as I swing around is at the edges there seems to be, I don't know if you'd call it a pincushion effect. Maybe that's similar to a SuperView sort of thing. Maybe that's desirable, maybe that's not. But if you look in the corners or around the edges, it does feel like the image kind of wraps around, especially if I get that image real close to my face. Unfortunately, my computer does not play well with 4K, so I'm watching this in a relatively small window. We've set her down on the ground, and you get to see that tree waggling in the wind, and we're going to take off here in just a moment. It does have a microphone on it, and it does record that audio. In micros, it just doesn't sound very good. Even with a larger size motor on a 3-inch prop, it just doesn't sound very pleasing. It may sound better on a larger motor with a larger prop, or it just may not sound very good at all. You know, this isn't a GoPro quality audio, so if you're wanting audio, you're going to get kind of a high-pitched drilling noise to it. But we're going to fly around the neighborhood, and again, this entire video has been sampled at 4K, so to make sure I keep everything straight and my video editing doesn't go awry, this footage is in 4K. Any footage that you see outside of the recorded footage of the RunCam Nano Split 4 is also been upsampled to 4K. Typically, I record in 1080p, 60 frames a second. All the video that you've seen in this video is going to be at 4K, 30 frames per second. Hopefully that does not cause a problem for you to be able to diagnose the camera and everything that you see in the video, but I wanted to make sure it was static so I wasn't downsampling or upsampling any of the footage. I will put a link down in the video description to a 2.7K sample, and you can view that as well. I'm going to keep that kind of raw, kind of native. I don't want to have any other videos around it. That way, if you're looking at this particular camera, you have the greatest possible chance of being able to see the footage in its native form without video software manipulation. It's kind of unavoidable to a certain degree when you're putting together a presentation, so to speak. So the video outside of the HD view, everything else is going to be upsampled to that 4K, 30 frames per second. Now we get a look at my neighbor's house and their 3 garages. You see the wind kind of blowing me around as I try to hold it steady, and you get to see those shingles. I think that's always something that we see, is we take a look at the shingles and we get a little bit of digital shimmer. Of course, we do have settings that we can manipulate on the camera itself and the board to maybe counteract that a little bit, depending upon if that's something you want to counteract as well. My neighbor's red truck is always something that we tend to look at. And I still, as I'm watching this back with you, I'm still seeing that kind of wrapped around view. And I'm really curious on how you guys see that. Is that desirable? Does that give you possibly the feeling that it's flying faster? Of course, I'm very much just kind of cruising around in this demonstration of the product, but I'm wondering if that will give us a greater sense of speed, having that kind of wrapped view. I just throw that out there as something for you to tell me on whether that's something desirable or not, because I tend to like a super wide field of view, especially when I'm flying in the house, and this seems to represent that super wide field of view. But then again, if you're looking at doing some sort of sin whooping or just long steady flights of a scenic environment, maybe that's not what you want. We fly in and out of the shadows as I typically do. We get to see all sorts of different colors with cars, with greenery, with the roads, with the bricks that we have in our neighborhood. We've also got our friends across the street who are cleaning up their boat, getting ready to go out to the lake. And we had an individual standing out there in a yellow shirt. I think it's a contractor. He was working on the deck for the neighbors. They had their deck removed and he is rebuilding that deck. We also had a deck on our house. If you look way back, way back, in the video footage on the channel, you may be able to find a deck in our backyard as well. We tore that down just because we thought maintenance on it long term, you either have to spend a lot more money and replace your deck with the wood that's been coated in plastic, or it's got plastic sheaths around all the studs and boards to make sure it lasts a long time, which really increases your costs, also your labor costs. We decided to just go with a nice stamped and stained cement pad, which we have really enjoyed. That's a pretty good look at the HD footage. Let's go ahead and look at our FPV, starting with the light test. Here we are. This is the image that we do see in the goggles. And you can see we've got that red dot up in the top right. That is the dot indicating that the HD camera is recording. We've got some OSD of stuff on a screen, of course, as I take my cloth in and out of that sun. It does seem as though it's a little bit of a hazy view. I'm still leaning towards the RunCam Split 3 Lite. It might be Nano Lite. The one that was in the Mobula 6 HD as being a better FPV view, but I'll show you a sample of that up next, just so that we can get a little bit of a comparison between the two cameras. But of course, that camera does not do 4K. This camera does do 4K, so maybe that's a differentiating factor that you want to take into account. We also stand in those shadows of the tree. And speaking of trees, next time I'll have a video coming up, and we had some trees trimmed and we had some more trees removed, which might make some of you sad. But we were having a very difficult time getting grass to grow in some locations, and we decided that we needed to get some more light down on the ground, and so we had some trees removed. Move forward in our timeline here a little bit. Again, this is the FPV view, and you see that stuttering. That's what I was seeing in the goggles when I recorded 4K. It's a little bit of a latency issue is what I would call it. I don't know what speed of card we would need to be able to record 4K effectively. Yes, I did format the card inside the board. I went through that step to make sure that it wasn't that sort of problem. There might be higher speed cards, but these SanDisk cards, I always thought these were pretty high speed cards. You guys might be able to educate me more on which card I need to look to get for doing more 4K cameras. But what you see as far as that stuttering on screen is what I saw in the goggles as well. And this gives you another view of flying around the goggle view for this particular camera. And you can see from time to time how the latency that I'm experiencing with that SD card, and I keep pointing to the SD card because as I turned it down to 2.7K, I found that the latency was not there. So I think it's the SD card that's causing this stuttering that we see. And I thought about getting another high-speed card or a different one. I actually tried two different ones of the same brand, make, and speed of card from SanDisk, and they both did the same thing. So I think it has something to do with I just need a higher speed card. Of course, I need some card education from you all so that I can make sure that I have the highest speed card possible for 4K cameras, because I'm sure there's going to be more on the channel eventually. Also, just like we did in HD view, or I guess I shouldn't say HD, 4K view is what we were looking at. So you get to tell that when we're looking at this camera in FPV, I do not see that kind of wrapped view that we saw in HD. And that's something else that I noticed that I'm wondering. I'm, of course, very curious on how you all see it. For me, I don't do much sin whooping, although I think from time to time I do like to go out and get some HD footage. It's mainly when my kids are out playing in the backyard, or over Father's Day when they were washing the car. I took a quad out that had an HD camera, and I kind of circled the area that they were washing the van. The van is my car. I guess it's technically not a van, or Chrysler doesn't want to call it a van. It's a Chrysler Pacifica. It started out as an SUV years ago, and I think some review magazine came out and said that it was the quietest or best minivan of some particular year or something like that, and then Chrysler got on board and said, yes, it's now a minivan. It's funny with brands and marketing and however they see things. But that's our HD and our FPV view. Let's go into the settings. So you see here at the bottom it says 1080p 50 frames per second. It shows you that when you power up the camera, so it tells you, even when you're not in the OSD, it tells you what recording setting you currently have on, which is a good thing, so you know you need to go into the settings and change. As I said previously, you can use the button on the side that also, there's two buttons. One powers the camera on and off. The other one manipulates the OSD or gets you into the OSD, and then you go back to the other camera to move up and down and make selections. I've gone through the resolutions. You can see that it comes out of the box with auto recording on. I did also test if it loses power, does it lose the recording? And it does not. We haven't actually seen that in a while, where you lose the recording if you lose power on these particular boards, but I did test that, and I go into some of the finer settings on here. And you also notice that it has the ability to flip. So for whatever reason, for cable management or wire management purposes, if you need to flip the camera to mount it how you want to mount it in your quad, you can turn it upside down. We've also got some metering options in there as well. And you see the firmware down there is listed at V1.1.4. And I also notice on the manual for the RunCam site, it actually points to the RunCam Split 3 for a firmware. So I did not update this or change this firmware. I used the same firmware that it came to me at, because I was not certain if that firmware is cross-compatible with those different products. You also see that where you can change the power frequency, 50 to 60 hertz. I had that question in one other time. I apologize, I can't remember who it was. Somebody asked me to confirm a camera was 50 or 60 hertz. That particular camera they were asking about didn't have that setting in it, so I don't know how I would confirm that, but this camera does show that setting. The last bit of this is the price point. I'm seeing it listed at $74.99. It's still on pre-order, so it might take a while. You know, right now there's not a lot of shipping, or at least the shipping isn't going on as quickly as it once did, because there are just a fewer flights and there's less cargo moving through the air. But at that price point, from what you've seen so far, what do you think? What's your diagnosis of the FPV view? What's your diagnosis of the HD view? Oh, I almost forgot. Let's take a look at a sample of the RunCam Split 3 Lite that was in the Mobula 6 HD. Now we're looking at that outside. Of course, it's a different environment. It's not out in the street. It's behind the house. But still, I'm leaning towards that being a better FPV view. Always ask your opinion on reviews. I think that's valuable information. Oftentimes, many of you have experience with photography and videography that goes well beyond my experience, and I think that's very valuable information for people who might be coming to the channel. I don't necessarily have all the answers all the time, especially on finer components like this, and I think that it's those of you that do have that knowledge and expertise, it's very valuable for others to go down through the comment section and read those comments as well, and have discussions with those of you that do have that knowledge and expertise. Hopefully you've seen as much as you need to see, but if not, don't forget I have that 2.7K a sample down in the video description. That'll be kind of a raw file that'll go to a Google Drive or maybe a separate YouTube video, so that you can take a look at that sample as well. And what do you think? Please leave your comments down in the comment section below. I said it just a moment ago, but those of you that have that video lens photography sort of expertise, it sure is valuable information, and I know I appreciate it when you enlighten me to things that you've learned over your expertise and your years, and I'm sure others do as well. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, otherwise, please leave them in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.